Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tvayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhur Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine Sthapakaya Cha Dharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Avatar Parishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. Let's just, for the first 20-30 seconds, let's just keep our eyes closed. Namaste. So the series of classes we'll be taking is on Raja Yoga. Now why I specifically chose this text is because recently I completed at Harvard Divinity School a monastic fellowship. It was a 1-year course, and in the second year I attended a class on Raja Yoga. Just one thing about these classes and how it's different than classes in India. So what the professor does at Harvard, they give us a large reading assignment, about 800 pages per week. Now the students are expected to, ahead of time, read all the pages and be prepared to talk about what we heard, what we read. So we'll all sit around in a circle together, and the professor will ask each of us to speak. During this class, the professor is Professor Francis Clooney. He curated an impressive list of readings. It included traditional commentators like Vyasa, Vijnana Bhikshu, Raja Bhoja, and Shankara. It also included early 20th century commentators like Swami Hariharananda Aranya and modern commentators like Edwin Bryant and Gerald Larson. But I could not help to notice that there was one glaring omission in the curriculum. Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga was not included. So I asked Professor Clooney, why did you not include Raja Yoga? He replied, he didn't tell me, but he said that I think in the academic circles, Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga is not thought of, he's not thought of as an academician. At Harvard and other places, he's thought probably more like a patriot of India. I thought that was a glaring omission, and because to me, it was precisely the bridge that was missing in that classroom, a bridge between textual rigor and personal transformation, between philosophical abstraction, which is what Harvard is very famous for, and lived experience. And even some of our monastic scholars, Swami Bhajananji and other scholars, they've contributed academic-like papers arguing about Swami Vivekananda's original contributions in Raja Yoga to 3 distinctive disciplines: philosophy, psychology, and ethics. But I felt it was even more important because Swamiji's language, it explains the Yoga Sutras, it animates them. And it takes the core philosophical, ethical, and psychological dimensions of Patanjali's system and it makes them practical. It makes even the subtlest doctrines of philosophy put in a language that even a child can understand. And moreover, as we go through the text, we'll see that unlike the other scholars that I mentioned, it not only speaks to the head, it speaks also to the hand and heart. Another thing I wanted to mention was the uniqueness of this composition of students that attended this class. I categorized them into 5 different students, 5 different categories. One was cross-comparative philosophers who compared the Yoga Sutras with Advaita, Bhakti, and other Indian schools. Maybe somebody is getting a PhD in Advaita philosophy. Now, there were other philosophy students. There was a Buddhist, his name is Tenjen Rinpoche. He is from Tawang. And he was giving insightful analysis, elucidating on the differences between the Yoga Sutras and different schools of Buddhism, particularly meditation techniques. In fact, there was a Persian student, Islamic student, and she used to bring a text of, I believe his name is Al-Biruni. He's an 11th century scholar. He translated the Yoga Sutras into Urdu. It's the oldest translation of the Yoga Sutras. So that's one category, cross-comparative philosophers within Vedanta and outside of Vedanta. Another category, ethical thinkers, ethical disciplines, focusing on the yamas, niyamas. There's one Yoga Sutras, 1.33, Maitri Karuna Murdita Upekshanam. Maitri means this friendship, Karuna, compassion, Murdita is gladness, and Upekshanam, indifference. So in Buddhism, they have something called the Brahma Viharas. There it's called, instead of Maitri, Metta. Metta also means friendship. And it's a core part of Buddhism philosophy, cultivating the idea of friendship. So ethical disciplines. Within ethical disciplines, I wrote a paper on this. Swami Vivekananda's ideas, his contributions to the yamas, niyamas, is very nuanced. If you compare his contributions with those of traditional commentators like Vyasa, Rajabhoja, Shankara, Ramanujacharya, he talks about this in the Gita. You'll see that they're, like I think Ramanujacharya mentioned that ahimsa means non-killing of other creatures. But Swami Vivekananda, just one example, how nuanced he was. He said ahimsa has several different meanings. How do we traditionally think of ahimsa? Can you say it? Yeah. Okay, not to have any anger. Okay, so one Dr. Tapas said not to have any anger. So we say non-violence. But Swamiji interprets it in different contexts in different ways. In one context, he says ahimsa, he applies it to the aspect of strength. That you should have ahimsa, I'm paraphrasing, when you could bring legions of forces to their knees. At that time, you should have ahimsa. So this concept of first have strength, not acting from tamas, which would be cowardice, but acting from rajas or sattva. Another concept of ahimsa, Swamiji said, lack of jealousy. These are very, in the modern day, they have something called Facebook envy. Does anyone know what Facebook envy is? Especially among the young people, they have these Facebook accounts, and surveys show that there's a leading cause of depression amongst young people. They have these Facebook accounts, they show their life, and when they see their other friends and how their other friends are living their life, they sometimes get depressed. It's a condition called Facebook envy. So this is from the ethical side. Another side is psychology. Swamiji made many unique contributions in Raja Yoga to the field of psychology. In fact, I think some work is being done on this. You can argue that at that time, Sigmund Freud, he was very popular at the end of the 19th century. His focus was on the unconscious mind. Unconscious mind means what? Traumatic memories. But Swamiji took this concept in 1.5 of klishta and aklishta vrittis. Klishta, kleshas means pain bodies, and aklishta means non-pain bodies, spiritual thoughts. And he said that to give greater emphasis to these spiritual thoughts. So 100 years later, this was emphasized in positive psychology. Another idea in psychology, and we'll see this, how many of you here have heard of William James? So William James was considered to be the founder of modern psychology. He was a professor at Harvard. In fact, it's because of him, before psychology was merged with philosophy. After William James came, they made psychology into a separate discipline. So, William James, he was so inspired. Swami Vivekananda met him and went to his house. We'll show a picture of that. William James was so inspired by Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, he wrote a text, I believe in the 1940s, Varieties of Religious Experience. And there he talked about how religious, he talked about in terms of psychology, how religious experiences, the idea of religious experiences, and it's not something paranormal, but it's something coming from the superconscious. So I mentioned 3 categories: cross-comparative philosophy, ethical thinkers, psychology students. Another set of students in our Harvard class, they were science majors. One was a chemistry or a microbiology. They were interested in consciousness studies, which is a very big thing right now. 5th were they were not an official part of the class, they kind of audited the class. Hatha Yoga, this concept of asanas and pranayama, breathing. That's very popular in the West. So many of them took this book by B.K.S. Iyengar. It talks about different postures in Hatha Yoga. And finally, there's a small group of us that were interested in, like all of you, spiritual achievement. How to meditate better. How to this concept of nirvana, asampragyata samadhi. What does that mean? So it was quite a revelation to me. Because as you know, in our training center classes, we attend training center, we all have just we only look at it through one filter. How to attain this asampragyata samadhi. So it really opened my eyes that these texts can be looked at different ways in different people. Swami Vivekananda, when we go through Raja Yoga, we'll see that he addresses these different audiences. He doesn't speak in a didactic, top-down method. He makes it so easy that even a child could understand, as we talked. So this is what I wanted to tell Professor Clooney. It was these 6 reasons why I felt that we should have it in our curriculum at Harvard. Now, before we dive into the text itself, just a brief overview. Swami Vivekananda gave this series of classes in the first week of 1895 in New York. Raja Yoga consists of 2 major parts. The first half consists of Swamiji's lectures delivered in New York. This includes not only the Yoga Sutras, Yoga system, but also Advaita Vedanta and elements of Tantra, what Swamiji calls Kundalini Yoga. The second half, Swamiji, is his running commentary and a free translation of the Yoga Sutras. Now, one thing that when we take up any text, this is how we were trained actually, context is very important. Time, place, circumstance. So because of that, I want to go back and look at the timeline of Swami Vivekananda. When he gave these classes on Raja Yoga, one question I'm going to ask all of you, who was he speaking to? He's not speaking to an Indian audience. He went to the West in 1895. Time, place, circumstance. So if we look at this, this is Swamiji, I'm just looking at his timeline between 1893 and the beginning of 1895. So it shows that he arrived in Vancouver. Now, he met Professor John Henry Wright. Who here has heard of John Henry Wright? Many of you must have heard of him. He played a very critical role in allowing Swami Vivekananda to speak at the Parliament of Religions. So when he first arrived in Vancouver, he met this lady, her name is Kate Sanborn, intellectual lady, philosopher, and literary person. She took Swamiji to Massachusetts, and she took him to a place called Annisquam. It was August of 1893. Now in Annisquam, let me go there. This is the Annisquam Church, Unitarian Church. I actually visited all these places when I was in Massachusetts. This is where Swamiji gave a lecture at the Unitarian Church on the manners and customs of India. He also stayed in Annisquam. That's like a summer home. So many of the Harvard professors, including Henry Wright and others, Swamiji had conversations with them in Annisquam. It's through these conversations that Dr. Henry Wright, is it Dr. Henry Wright or Barrows? One of them, he wrote a letter to the Parliament of Religions that here I have somebody who is more learned and educated than all our professors put together. So he should be admitted, allowed to go and speak at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago. So it all took place here. Here Swamiji was also exposed to other professors, science, psychology, philosophy. Let's go back to our timeline. So he gave his Parliament of Religions in September 11th, 1893. Then in November 20th, 1893, it says he begins his Midwestern lecture tour. What type of audience will he be exposed to there? There's something, these are Christians. They call them Bible Belt Christians. They believe in Christ. So they're evangelicals, you can say. He was exposed to that there. Very dogmatic and narrow in their understanding of Christianity. That's in November of 1893. Again, this is another audience that he was exposed to. Then in 1894, he began his lectures and classes on the East Coast. He's getting exposed to another type of audience. May 16th, 1894, it says he speaks at Harvard University. So this is Sefer Hall. Actually, there's a classroom here where Swamiji spoke. Sever Hall, room 113. I actually attended a class here by Dr. Steven Pinker, one of the leading rationalists in the world. So the classroom is as it was during Swamiji's time. Again, why I'm bringing this up, what are the different types of influences he's getting exposed to? This is very critical if we are to understand Raja Yoga. Who is he speaking to? Another audience he spoke to, this is Radcliffe Women's College. I don't know how many of you know the history about Swamiji when he came back from America back to India in the beginning of, I think it was 1897. When he was taken from Bhuj to Shelda, from Shelda he was taken, where was he taken? Where was the first place he was taken? Yes, Ripan's Women's College. It's still there today. Exclusively women's college. Same thing when Swamiji went to the West, he spoke at this women's college. At that time, women were not permitted to attend Harvard, so he spoke at the women's college. Again, this is another piece. Understanding the mind of women as well. This is William James's home. We talked about William James. So I think I've given, how many different types of people have I given? Scientists, philosophers, at the Parliament of Religions. You know, Parliament of Religions was actually part of something called the Chicago World Fair. And at that time, science was the big thing. Darwinism. How many of you here have heard of T.J. Huxley? He was called the bulldog of Darwinism, pushing forth evolution. At that time also science, this Nikola Tesla, his contributions, he talked about AC electricity, how electricity can flow through AC rather than DC. So these were all on display at the Chicago World Fair. So scientists, philosophers, psychology. Another cottage industry it's called spiritualism. And that took place, 1894. You can see July, August 1894, Green Acre Religious Conference. We actually took a field trip there. I took many students. And this is Swamiji, just a side note, you can see how happy he looks here. There's a reason for that. If you go back to the timeline, from when he first came to Harvard, America, in July 25th, 1893, he was put to a lecture tour, the lecture bureau. So he was moving about everywhere. This was the first time, it's in his letters. If you want to see his letters, I think July 31st, 1894, he wrote a letter to Mrs. Hale or Mrs. Bull, and he said, "Blessed am I to be poor, and blessed am I to be an Advaitin, and blessed are these people to be poor, because they get Advaita Vedanta." What kind of people were there at Green Acre? One was, it's called spiritualism. Who has heard of spiritualism? So what they used to do at that time, it started in the 1850s. It was a cottage industry. They would sit around a table and try to communicate with spirits, dead spirits. It's called seances. So we sit around, close our eyes. This is relevant when we go through the epigraph, when we go through Swamiji's talks on Raja Yoga. I took a group of people and we were reading the letters of Swamiji at that time. So what happened was a cyclone took place at that time. And this tent here Swamiji was giving a lecture underneath this tent. the tent blew off because of the cyclone. So you see Swami Vivekananda's sense of humor. He said the spiritualists were so strong, their spirituality was so strong that the tent blew off. He was making fun of this idea of attributing spiritualism to random incidents with nature. And just one side note, Swamiji stayed in this building, we went to that building, and this is a postcard from about the 1893, and every day in the morning time he would come and take a bath there. So I've given about 5 different types of classes of people. Scientists, including scientists, philosophers, psychologists, scientists, spiritualism, women's rights, Bible Belt people, people who are strongly Christian, Unitarians, those who believe Unitarianism is another branch of Christianity. It believes in that not the Holy Trinity, just one God. And it's very open to hearing the experiences of other religions. In fact, one side note is that Swamiji gave a talk at the Unitarian Church. We saw that in Anisquam, and also in other places like Berkeley, California. He gave talks there. So this is the epigraph. And this Swamiji wrote it, so he said, I'll just read it. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divine within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. Now, just looking at this on this face, I presented to you 5 different audiences. Do you see any relevance? Now let's take up each line. Each soul is potentially divine. So, I'm the Prabhupada Bharata city editor again, so I have to push our magazine. So in the January issue of Prabhupada Bharata, there's an article by Swami Atma Rupananda. It says potential versus actual divinity in Swami Vivekananda. So they're analyzing this why did he say potentially divine? And he writes in his article, I don't know how many of you have heard of Swami Asheshananda ji? He lived in Portland. He was the last living monastic disciple of Holy Mother. He passed away in 1996. I had the good fortune when I was very young to serve him for a few weeks. So he mentions in this, he mentions Swamiji said one evening in a lecture, Asheshananda ji is repeating, Swamiji says each soul is potentially divine. Then in his dramatic, forceful way, Asheshananda says, but I will have to disagree with the Swami. And he chuckled a little. Then he said with words of fire, it is not potential divinity. It is actual divinity, here and now. So how do you explain that? Why did he say potential divinity? So I'm just going to come down to this article. Atma Rupananda gives one explanation. I think that there's 2 ways of looking at this. One is through the lens of Advaita. The other is through the lens of yoga philosophy, Sankhya yoga philosophy. Advaita. And I'm just quoting Atma Rupananda. He says, Swamiji spoke much of the illusory nature of the world. This world is nothing. It is a vision, a dream. And this life is one of many. The whole of this nature is nothing but Maya. But then Swamiji Atma Rupananda writes, it is an idea good for a life of renunciation, but not for the everyday life of others, not for those who have families to care for, dependence to feed, work to attend to, civic responsibilities to discharge. He continues, Swamiji himself says, I understand those ideas and I believe them, but now I have come to the point where they have led me to a state of depression and apathy. Why should I go to work? Why engage with my family? Everything has become meaningless, and I don't know how I continue, or why I should continue. Yes, that's the problem. He's quoting the problems of householders that they face. So in this light, Swami Vivekananda told this Sharan Chandra Chakraborty, he said that he was a scholar who was a Vedantin, that you should go into business. And he consults him on going into business. And then the disciple says, what business should I go in for? Where will I get money? Swamiji's reply, what nonsense. Within you lies indomitable power. Always thinking, I am nothing, you've become powerless. Why you alone? The whole race has become so. Go round the world once, and you'll find how vigorous is the life current of other nations. And what do? Even after learning so much, you go from door to door crying, give me employment. Each soul is potentially divine. The next line, the goal is to manifest this divine within, by controlling nature, external and internal. So this was one explanation, the Advaitic explanation. Each soul is potentially divine. That Swamiji wanted to make his practical Vedanta. His emphasis was on taking that traditional Advaita Vedanta and making it practical. So some scholars have said this was a unique contribution of Swami Vivekananda to the Advaita philosophy. And it should be looked at by the scholars of Harvard. Another way to look at each soul as potentially divine is from the lens of Sankhya Yoga philosophy. What's the difference between yoga and Advaita? Sankhya Yoga and Advaita. So in Advaita philosophy, Brahman and Maya. Maya is something unreal. Yet in the yoga philosophy, what are the two elements? Purusha and Prakriti. And unlike Advaita Vedanta, in the yoga philosophy, Prakriti is real. It's jada, it's inert, but it's real. So the goal in yoga, unlike they say Advaita Vedanta, where the goal is to unite the Jivatman with the Paramatman, the goal in yoga is to do what? To separate Purusha from Prakriti. So yes, Advaita will say right here, right now. But yoga philosophy, potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divine within by controlling nature, external and internal. Can anyone say what do you think he meant by external? Worship, okay. Yes, and another thing is like the Shama Dhamma, like the external organs that are always going outward, controlling them. And internal organs. It's in the Sankhya philosophy, the karmendriyas, gyanendriyas. So the gross is the external, one argument. The eyes, nose, mouth. Controlling them from going to the external. And the internal is the mind. Buddhi, manas, buddhi, asmita. The mind, ego, body. Mind, ego, and intellect. Next line, do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. So, one scholar of our order, he's written the book Vedantic Cosmopolitanism, Swami Vivekananda, the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda. There he was making and not only he, Swami Bhajananji, the vice president of our order, I think he wrote a text, Glory of Monastic Life. He says that this is one of the unique contributions of Swami Vivekananda. All the other past acharyas, Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, all the schools of Advaita, Bhakti, they all gave, they either placed Jnanakanda, the path of knowledge, as inferior or superior, or Karmakanda, work, as inferior or superior. In many philosophies, it says that work only gives you chitta shuddhi, purity of mind. So what Bhajanji had mentioned, do this by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more of, or all of these, and be free. So this is another reason why I thought Swamiji it would have been so helpful for that curriculum. Because unlike traditional commentators, he's not, see how nuanced, he's not one size fits all. He takes you from where you're at and lifts you from there. Next one. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. So you see how he addresses in these, one of our monks called these the Maha Mantras, the 4 Mahavakyas of Swami Vivekananda. And see how in that, if we look at them carefully, he addresses the scientist, the Bible Belt Christians, the spiritualist who believe the goal is to communicate with the spirits above. So this emphasis of making yoga practical, manifesting it, and the whole thing is experiential. Okay, now we'll just go, we have about 10 minutes, and then we'll do some, last 10 minutes we'll do some question answer or any discussion people want to engage. Next one is the preface. Again, I want you, as we're reading this, I want you all to remember those 5 categories I mentioned as we're going through the text now, because this makes the text more clear. We can understand what Swamiji meant. So let's continue. Since the dawn of history, various extraordinary phenomena have been recorded as happening amongst human beings. Witnesses are not wanting in modern times to attest the fact of such events, even in societies living under the full blaze of modern science. The vast mass of such evidence is unreliable as coming from ignorant, superstitious, or fraudulent persons. In many instances, the so-called miracles are imitations. Who is he referring to here? The spiritualist. You know, the people that sit around a table, they hold their hands and they try to communicate with the what we call the paranormal. But now there's a conflict. There's another audience, the scientist. They'll dismiss these spiritualists. So Swamiji continues, but what do they imitate? It is not the sign of a candid and scientific mind to throw overboard anything without proper investigation. So now he's bringing a scientific methodology to religion. Surface scientists, unable to explain the various extraordinary mental phenomena, strive to ignore their very existence. Who are these surface scientists? Can anyone guess? Dr. Thomas? Okay. Medicine, okay. Yes. Yes. Okay, so yes. So Dr. Tapas Kumar said it nicely. He's a doctor, so he said yes, he's referring to people like him and all of us, surface scientists, people educated, degrees in chemistry, biology, but they absolutely don't bother to investigate. They call it, I think today they call it woo-woo science. So Swamiji continues, they are therefore more culpable than those who think that their prayers are answered by a being or beings above the clouds. Who are these people, beings or beings above the clouds? Those Bible Belt people, the Christians. God is there, we're down here. Or the spiritualist, or beings above the clouds, or then those who believe that their petitions will make such beings change the course of the universe. The latter have the excuse of ignorance, or at least a false system of education in their childhood. And this dependence which has taught them to depend upon such beings for help. And this dependence has now become a part of their degenerate nature. The former, meaning the educated, have no such excuse. So now this next part, this is what really inspired William James, the founder of modern psychology. For thousands of years, such phenomena have been investigated, studied, and generalized. The whole ground of the religious faculty of man has been analyzed, and the practical result is the science of Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga does not, after the unpardonable manner of some modern scientist, deny the existence of facts which are very difficult to explain. On the other hand, it gently, yet in no uncertain terms, tells the superstitious that miracles and answers to prayers and powers of faith, though true as facts, are not rendered comprehensible through the superstitious explanation of attributing them to the agency of a being or beings above the clouds. Again, remember Swamiji's joke when that tent at Green Acre was flown off? He made that joke. It's the spirit, they had so much spirituality that the tent flew off. Now the main core, it declares to mankind that each being is only a conduit for the infinite ocean of knowledge and power that lies behind. It teaches that desires and wants are in man, that the power of supply is also in man, and that whatever and whenever a desire, a want, a prayer has been fulfilled, it was out of this infinite magazine that the supply came, and not from any supernatural being. The idea of supernatural beings, and stop there. So that's the essence of Raja Yoga. In the first 8 lectures, and then he just gives an explanation which we're going to go more and more into in the following, whenever we take the class again. There is no supernatural, says the yogi, but there are in nature gross manifestations and subtle manifestations. The subtle are the causes, the gross the effects. The gross can be easily perceived by the senses, not so the subtle. The practice of Raja Yoga will lead to the acquisition of the more subtle perceptions. And the subject of the first lectures in the present book is that form Raja Yoga, and the aphorisms follow. They're the free translation. They form the Yoga Sutras. Okay, so